Today, Bitcoin crosses $100,000 after President Trump announces a trade agreement with the UK. Plus, one of his key crypto advisors plans to launch a Bitcoin investment company. And Robert Leshner of Superstate discusses the firm's new offering, which lets companies issue shares on the Solana blockchain. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Tanea McKeel. Crypto markets in the green this morning after President Trump announced a trade agreement with the UK. The president was light on details when he held a press conference about the deal, but investors have eagerly awaited progress on trade agreements since Trump's tariffs rocked the markets last month. Bitcoin passed the $100,000 level again for the first time since February, and as of noon traded under $100,800. That's after touching a high of $101,500. Ether spiked nearly 13%, passing $2,000, and Cardano jumped 9%. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. David Bailey, BTC Inc. CEO and a crypto advisor to President Trump, plans to launch a publicly traded Bitcoin investment firm. The company will be called Nakamoto, a nod to Bitcoin's anonymous creator, and has raised $300 million, $200 million in equity funding, and $100 million in convertible debt. The plan for the company is to buy companies around the world, and Nakamoto will invest its Bitcoin into them. The new firm is also expected to list on the NASDAQ by this summer using a SPAC merger. The news was first reported by The Information, and a person familiar with the matter, who asked not to be named, confirmed the news to CNBC. Currently, Strategy stands as the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin. We also recently told you Stripe founder Jack Mallers is expected to lead a new Bitcoin holding company called 21. Next, celebrities who endorsed FTX may be off the hook in a lawsuit. A federal judge in Florida dismissed claims against most high-profile celebrities, including Tom Brady, Kevin O'Leary, and Steph Curry. In a filing on Wednesday, the judge argued plaintiffs didn't demonstrate the celebrities had sufficient knowledge of the misconduct relating to FTX's downfall. The judge also dismissed online influencers who allegedly marketed the defunct platform. And finally, Coinbase just struck the largest crypto M&A deal in history. The exchange announced today that it will buy Dubai-based crypto options exchange Deribit for $2.9 billion. That's through $700 million cash and 11 million shares of the company's stock. Coinbase says the deal acts as a step toward offering customers access to spot, futures, perpetual futures, and options trading under one platform, and it expects the deal to close by the end of the year. According to Coinbase, Deribit facilitated more than $1 trillion in trading volume last year. As of noon, shares of Coinbase climbed 5%. All right, for our main story, crypto technology firm Superstate announced a new product called Opening Bell. The offering lets companies issue and trade SEC-registered shares directly on blockchain networks, and Superstate is starting with Solana. Crypto World's Mackenzie Sigalos spoke to Robert Leshner, CEO of Superstate, about the launch.
So let's start with the news. You're aiming to bring fully regulated, publicly traded stock onto the blockchain, starting with shares of Sol Strategies. That's a major shift in how public markets work today. So why now, and what does this moment represent for the future of market structure?
Yeah, well, today we're announcing the launch of a product called Opening Bell, meant to bring public equity from traditional markets to blockchains, where it can simultaneously trade on exchanges like the NASDAQ or the NYSE, as well as exchanges on Solana and Ethereum. And the reason why now is because finally the technology has gotten to the point where you can have millions of users trading on-chain with real-time settlement 24/7, and it just works. And we're at the moment where there's an opportunity to replace the assets that are trading currently, mostly meme coins and crypto-native tokens, and complement them with new assets, equities, the largest and most important asset class in the world.
So let's talk about how this would actually work. So if regulators give this the green light, because that is still a question mark, what would it feel like for an investor to buy or sell Sol Strategies shares on chain? Is that something where it's a real stock in a crypto wallet? What are the mechanics here?
Yeah, so it's a real stock, not a wrapper around the stock or some derivative instrument that is represented and trades as a token on a blockchain instead of being recorded in traditional record keeping so that it can trade on an exchange. And to an investor, it's as simple as trading any crypto token. The only difference is that it represents shares in a real company as opposed to something that's somewhat detached from a company that they're used to.
And Sol Strategies is just the first. What other companies have you spoken to about potentially tokenizing shares?
Well, there's a long pipeline of issuers that are excited about the opportunity for their shares to trade in existing markets as well as a new capital market. And Sol Strategies is the first company. It makes a lot of sense for us to work with them because they know Solana so deeply. And it's a completely natural fit for them to trade on Solana. And so, as a first issuer, they're perfect. But I think and expect that, after we test the market with one company who's publicly listed in multiple different venues, then there's going to be a lot more interest in tapping into this additional capital market. Because to a company, more capital demand is better and superior. And so I think we're going to see a lot of companies have this dual listing structure between US exchanges and crypto native blockchains.
But at this point, who else has signaled interest?
Well, we can't really go into specifics about other issuers yet until they're ready to announce, because the companies that are going to do this are also publicly registered companies. And so we're at the point now where we're thrilled to announce that Sol Strategies is going to be working with Superstate, but I expect there's going to be a few more.
I know it's difficult to say, but how big do you think this market could potentially get?
I think it can get huge, frankly. If you look at volumes today, the NASDAQ has about $300 billion a day of trading activity. Crypto in general has about $60 billion a day of trading activity. And Solana on-chain alone has about $3 billion a day of trading activity. And I think that a lot of the crypto volume will quickly flow into equities that are tokenized and accessible to the same investors in the same venues that crypto is trading in. And so I think, the first issuers are going to benefit tremendously from this, having access to a huge new market. But over time, I think crypto is going to grow because the assets that are available to crypto investors and crypto rails are just going to continue to multiply.
Let's zoom in on the investor experience. We've heard that this opens the door to things like 24/7 trading, instant settlement, global access. What's the real investor upside here, though, and who benefits the most?
Yeah, there's a few major upsides for investors. One is being able to access companies that they might not otherwise have access to from the familiarity of their existing wallets and their existing infrastructure. That matters both to retail as well as institutions. With our first products, at Superstate, we've tokenized T-bills in essence. And even institutional investors that, could very easily buy and sell T-bills prefer the crypto native version because it fits into the same custodian that they use. It fits into the same accounting that they use. It fits into all of their same workflows. And it settles 24/7, 365. And these assets are programmable, which is great for high-tech investors. And so, I think there's a lot of benefits when an equity gets upgraded onto using crypto as its record-keeping system. So, 24/7 instant settlement is a great advantage. And lastly, it's going to be, being able to tap into companies at an earlier stage. It's difficult to go public in general, but I expect over time that we're going to start to see a lot of companies going public first on blockchains.
What's the timeline here? As in, when could Opening Bell actually launch, and when might we see the first on-chain public equity trade?
Yeah, we're looking and hoping that this summer is going to mark the opening of trading of public equities on a blockchain.
Obviously, none of this happens without regulation. What are the biggest hurdles still ahead from a compliance or even infrastructure standpoint? And how is Superstate currently working with regulators to make this possible?
So very recently, the Solana Policy Institute and Superstate and a decentralized exchange on Solana submitted a proposal to the SEC for exactly how tokenized public equities could work, trading in a decentralized exchange on a blockchain. And hopefully this is the foundation for broad policy and exemptive relief to enable equities to trade in a new file format, so to speak. And so we're incredibly excited to engage with them. They've demonstrated a lot of forward-thinking ideas around how markets in general should be evolving with the development of new technology. And so it's going to require their approval, but it's something that we're optimistic about.
Final big picture question for you. You mentioned the fact that you've already tokenized T-bills and now you're going after public equities. What's your long-term vision for how traditional finance and crypto infrastructure start to merge, and where does Superstate go from here?
Yeah, well, eventually every single asset class is going to be issued and traded on-chain because it's a better file format than the way assets are recorded today. They can move around the world basically instantly, basically for free, 24/7, and it's programmable. And that's just an incredible starting place for any asset to live. And I think over time, we're going to try to engage a lot of different types of issuers, whether it's equity or fixed income or new asset classes, to bring those assets on chain.
Something that Vlad Tenev over at Robinhood talks a lot about is potentially tokenizing the private equity market. Is that something that you're also looking at?
Well, it's incredibly exciting because it's a huge market, but I think that it comes after markets that are already extremely liquid. And the reason being, when you take an asset that's private or illiquid and you put it on chain, it doesn't change the demand for it to trade on a secondary basis. It might make it slightly easier for the people that do want to transact in it, but it doesn't fundamentally make it a vibrant market. And so I think where we're going to start, at Superstate and as a broader society, is starting with liquid asset classes and working our way towards getting to private equity, venture, and a lot of illiquid assets.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.